I could still hear the click of the computer mouse sharp and cold, like a gunshot in the deathly silent conference room of Apex Analytics. It was the moment when Karen Mitchell, my manager, stood behind my desk, her icy eyes scanning the 23 dumbfounded colleagues, and declared that my year's worth of work, my blood, sweat, and tears, was worthless garbage. Then she pressed delete. The screen in front of me went blank as if my entire professional world had just been erased. But as the sting of humiliation still burned in my chest, my phone buzzed and a voice on the other end offered me a job worth $500,000. It was not just an escape, it was the spark that ignited the perfect revenge, a fight against injustice I never thought I would lead. It was a crisp autumn day in Chicago, where Apex Analytics' office stood in a gleaming glass building, reflecting light as if to hide the cracks within. Emily Carter, was just an ordinary employee, but I had spent a year building something no one in that room fully understood, an invisible foundation of trust and human connection, the very thing keeping the company from collapsing under the weight of its cold numbers. I had noted every small detail about our clients, Michael Thompson's sick dog, Sarah Bennett's company's 15th anniversary, or James Carter's passion for mystery novels. Those notes were not just data, they were the heartbeat of relationships that retained clients and brought in hundreds of thousands in revenue. But to Karen, they were meaningless words on a screen, inefficiencies that did not fit into her perfect Excel spreadsheets. As Karen stood there, haughty in her expensive gray suit, her voice cut through the air like a knife. "We are not here to play social games," she declared, as if treating clients like human beings was a crime. Emily's work is a textbook example of failing to uphold professional standards. Each word was a stab at my self-respect. I felt the eyes of my 23 colleagues, people who had laughed with me during lunch breaks, who had relied on me to handle client issues, now avoiding my gaze as if I were a criminal on public trial. The humiliation choked me, but I sat there, chin held high, trying to keep my voice from trembling. But then my phone buzzed, shattering the oppressive silence. I glanced at the screen and saw the name, Horizon Consulting. My heart pounded. I stepped out of the meeting room, my feet barely touching the ground, and when I answered, the voice on the other end was like a ray of light in a storm. "Emily, we have been watching your work at Apex, and we want you to join our team. $500,000 a year, equity in the company, and complete freedom to build client relationship strategies your way." I stood there in the cold hallway of Apex, feeling the world shift beneath my feet. They were not just offering a job, they were offering a chance to prove Karen wrong, to show that what she called garbage was the foundation of success. And more importantly, they understood that the relationships I had built did not live in the deleted files, they lived in the hearts of clients who trusted me. In that moment, I realized I held a weapon not to destroy, but to rebuild, to show Karen that her cruelty was not just a mistake, but an invitation to her own downfall. I returned to the meeting room, my heart pounding, but no longer out of fear. It was the fire of determination, the belief that justice would be served not through retaliation, but by letting the truth shine. Karen thought she had erased me, but she did not know she had just handed me the key to a new chapter. One I would write with the very values she despised. As I stepped out of Apex Analytics' cold hallway, the voice from Horizon Consulting still echoed in my mind like a hymn promising freedom, $500,000 autonomy, and the chance to prove that human relationships, what Karen Mitchell called inefficiencies, were the heartbeat of any business. But to understand why that offer felt like a lifeline in a storm, I need to take you back 18 months to when I first stepped into Apex Analytics, a place where client relationships were bleeding out like an untreated wound. That is where I began weaving those invisible threads connections that not only saved the company from the brink, but became my greatest weapon in the fight against Karen's injustice. I arrived at Apex on a spring morning when Chicago's sunlight streamed through the high-rise glass windows, but could not dispel the tense atmosphere in the office. I was hired as a client relations coordinator, a role that sounded dry, managing contact records, scheduling follow-ups, tracking client satisfaction metrics. But within my first week, I uncovered a truth no one dared admit: Apex was losing clients faster than a sinking ship. My predecessor had quit after 4 months without notice, leaving behind a mess of sterile communication logs as lifeless as a desert. The emails, call logs, notes, everything was soulless, as if written by a machine. There was not a trace of human connection, no hint that we cared about the people sending thousands of dollars to the company each month. Karen Mitchell, my manager, was the embodiment of that cold transactional philosophy. To her, business was just a series of transactions, Send invoices, deliver services, collect payments, repeat. She strode through the office like a general, her pen tapping rhythmically on her clipboard as if commanding an army of numbers. Client relations are about efficiency. Emily, she told me on my first day, her tone like she was reading from a management textbook. Do not waste time on things that cannot be measured. But I saw an opportunity she did not. In those lifeless records, I saw people with dreams, worries, and stories. And I decided to do what no one at Apex had done, treat clients like human beings. I started small. When Michael Thompson, the owner of a mid-sized manufacturing company, mentioned his golden retriever's hip problems during a routine check-in call, I noted it down. 2 weeks later, I asked about the dog's treatment. His voice on the phone changed entirely from professional courtesy to genuine warmth. He spent 20 minutes talking about a weekend trip to find a specialist vet, and I listened, not because it was my job, but because I genuinely cared. When Sarah Bennett celebrated her textile company's 15th anniversary, I sent a personalized message congratulating her on the milestone and asking about her growth plans. The result? She booked an additional consultation, bringing in $12,000 in unexpected revenue. These gestures were not costly or flashy. They were just listening, remembering, and acting like clients were friends worth valuing, not numbers on a spreadsheet. Day by day, I wove more of those invisible threads. James Carter, the owner of a specialty bookstore chain, started calling me directly for anything he needed just because I remembered he loved classic mystery novels and that his daughter was studying literature in college. Olivia Green, who ran a catering company, our third largest client, started referring Apex services to other businesses just because she enjoyed our chats about weekend farmers markets and her grandmother's recipe collection. Month after month, I watched client satisfaction metrics soar with retention rates improving by 37%. Those numbers were not just statistics, they were proof that when you treat people like people, they respond with loyalty, something no spreadsheet of Karen's could measure. But Karen never understood that. She would pass by my desk, see me typing notes she dismissed as idle chatter, and I could feel her disapproval radiating like a cold draft. During monthly reviews, she flipped through my performance reports with a scowl, her pen tapping harder than usual. Why are you spending 45 minutes on calls that should take 15? She would ask, her tone like she was interrogating a criminal. I tried to explain that those longer conversations were building stronger relationships, that clients requested to work directly with me, that my personalized approach was delivering real results. But to Karen, if it did not fit her spreadsheet formula, it had no value. She was obsessed with optimal efficiency, as if client loyalty could be calculated with a simple division. I did not let it deter me. I knew I was building something bigger, a bridge between Apex and the people who kept it alive. Every note I wrote, every call I made, every personal detail I remembered was a brick in that foundation. But deep down, I also knew that bridge was under threat from the very woman who stood above me, wielding power, unable to see the value of what I was doing. Karen was not just a bad manager, she was the symbol of a system that saw people as numbers, a system I was determined to change one conversation at a time. And when I stood in that hallway that day with Horizon Consulting's offer in hand, I realized that the invisible threads I had woven were not just Apex Foundation, they were my weapon to prove my worth, and the fire that would burn away the injustice Karen had inflicted on me. Horizon Consulting's offer burned in my mind like a smoldering ember ready to ignite into a full blaze. I stood there in Apex Analytics' cold hallway, feeling the weight of the invisible threads I had woven over the past 18 months, the relationships with clients, the small details of their lives. I had carefully noted the smiles over the phone when they realized I genuinely cared. But that fire was not just hope, it was anger, a quiet rage at Karen Mitchell, who had dismissed my work as garbage and tried to crush my value under her soulless spreadsheets. I did not know that just weeks later, Karen's arrogance would push everything to a breaking point where she not only challenged me, but single-handedly destroyed the very foundation keeping Apex afloat. It all began to shift during Apex annual strategy meeting held in a lavish conference room with windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. The sunlight streamed through the glass, but it could not dispel the tension in the air as our CEO, David Reynolds, stood before the team, his voice deep and authoritative. He announced that Apex client retention rates had reached an all-time high, a victory I knew was due to my inefficient conversations with Michael Thompson, Sarah Bennett, and others. Our approach to client relationship management is delivering results, David said, his eyes sweeping the room. We need to scale this personalization strategy. I felt a spark of pride in my chest, but when I glanced at Karen, I saw her lips tighten, her eyes sharp as knives. She was not pleased not because of the company's success, but because that success was tied to an approach she had despised from day one. After the meeting, Karen cornered me near the storage room where the smell of printer ink and old paper mingled with the stifling air. "I do not know what game you are playing with this client relationship act," she said, her voice as sharp as a well-honed blade. "But this company succeeds because of professionalism, not idle workplace chatter." Her words were like a slap, but I stayed calm, chin held high. I was used to her disdain, but this time she went further. She assigned me an audit of all client interactions over the past year, an enormous project requiring hundreds of hours documenting every call, every note, every effort to build relationships. It was not a task, it was a punishment, a way to pull me away from my real work connecting with clients and bury me under meaningless paperwork. But I did not let her win. I poured my heart into the audit, turning it into a masterpiece. In 53 pages, I did not just document what had happened, I proved how those personal conversations translated into business results. I showed that Olivia Green's referrals brought in new contracts, that my discussions with Michael Thompson about his expansion plans led to additional services, that James Carter's early contract renewals came from the trust I had built. Every detail from talks about Michael's dog to Sarah's company anniversary was tied to numbers over $2,000 in additional revenue. When I submitted the report, I felt proud, not just of the effort, but because it was proof of my philosophy that people, not metrics, are the heart of business. But Karen never read it with an open mind. On an autumn morning, as golden leaves fell outside the office windows, she called a department-wide meeting. "We need to review client relations protocols," she declared, her tone like a teacher correcting a wayward student. "And Emily's audit will serve as a discussion example." For one naive moment, I thought she had finally seen the value of my work. But as I projected the audit file onto the conference screen in front of 23 silent colleagues, Karen began dissecting every personal note, every detail about clients' lives as if they were sins. "This is evidence of breaching professional boundaries," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Chatting about pets and hobbies has no place in business communication." My blood rushed to my face, my neck burning as she tore through months of my work, turning my efforts into a cautionary tale. My colleagues, who had once relied on me to solve client issues, sat silent, their eyes averted. But the worst was yet to come. Karen opened my audit database, my entire work, every detail of the relationships I had built, and her finger moved the mouse to the delete button. "This entire approach is garbage," she declared, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Today, we return to professional, efficient protocols." And then, before everyone's horrified eyes, she pressed delete. The screen went blank. 53 pages, hundreds of hours, hundreds of thousands in revenue gone with a single click. Silence enveloped the meeting room, heavy like an impending storm. Karen turned away, a smug smile on her lips, as if she had just won a battle I did not know I was fighting. But she had miscalculated one thing: the relationships I had built did not live in that database. They lived in the trust of Michael Sarah James and Olivia, people who saw me not just as an employee, but as someone who genuinely cared. And when my phone buzzed in the middle of Karen's lecture on efficient protocols with Horizon Consulting's name on the screen, I knew this was not the end. It was the breaking point, the moment when Karen's injustice would begin to turn against her, and I would lead that fight not with petty revenge, but by letting the truth shine. My phone buzzed, cutting through Karen Mitchell's lecture on efficient protocols like a bell signaling freedom. The screen flashed the name, Horizon Consulting, and in that moment, as the eyes of 23 colleagues remained fixed on me, I felt a surge of electricity run through me. Having just watched my year's work, 53 pages, hundreds of hours of relationship building erased by Karen in front of everyone, I stood there, my heart pounding, not from the humiliation she wanted me to feel, but from a truth dawning on me: the relationships I had built did not live in the deleted data. They lived in the trust of clients and conversations about Michael Thompson's dog, Sarah Bennett's company milestone, James Carter's love for books. And as I stepped out of the meeting room to answer that fateful call, I knew Karen had not just given me an escape, she had unwittingly handed me the key to turn the tables. Apex Analytics' hallway was as cold as ever, but this time I did not feel weighed down by the glass walls or Karen's judgmental gaze. I answered the phone, my hands still trembling from adrenaline. Emily, the voice on the other end, said, firm and warm, We are Horizon Consulting. We have been watching what you have done at Apex, and we want you to join our team. $500,000 a year equity in the company, and complete freedom to build client relationship strategies your way. I nearly stopped breathing. $500,000 double my current salary, and more importantly, a chance to work with people who believed in my philosophy that business is not just transactions, but building trust, one conversation at a time. But what made my heart race even more were the next words: "We know you cannot take data from Apex, but we also know that client trust does not live in files. It lives in how you make them feel valued." If clients choose to work with you at Horizon, that is just the natural consequence of your different approach to business. They were not asking me to steal clients or breach ethics. They were simply stating a truth. If I left Apex and clients chose to follow me, the person who remembered their dogs, their milestones, their dreams, that was their choice. The offer was like a Chicago breeze clearing the fog of injustice Karen had cast over me. I stood there in the hallway feeling the power of the relationships I had built. The invisible threads Karen could not destroy no matter how many times she hit delete. And I knew right then that I would not just leave, I would make Karen face the consequences of her own actions. I stepped back into the meeting room, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. Karen was still droning on about her new protocols, her clipboard in hand like a shield for her efficiency philosophy. My colleagues, those who had witnessed the public humiliation I had just endured, kept their heads down, a few stealing glances at me with curiosity mixed with concern. Karen noticed my return, stopped her lecture, and looked at me with a haughty glare. "Do you have a question about the new protocols, Emily?" she asked, her tone suggesting I was a rebellious student in need of discipline. I took a deep breath, feeling the fire inside me flare. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and ringing through the room, "I have an announcement." Every eye turned to me, the air frozen. "I am resigning from Apex Analytics, effective immediately. I will be joining Horizon Consulting as Director of Client Relations." Silence blanketed the room, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the sound of someone's pen dropping onto the table. Karen blinked, her face shifting from smugness to confusion, then to a flicker of panic. "You cannot quit in the middle of a department meeting like this," she stammered, as if she could hold me back with regulations. "There are protocols, notice requirements, transition processes." I pulled out my phone, opened the email confirming Horizon's offer, and smiled. My employment contract allows immediate resignation in cases of a hostile work environment or unprofessional behavior. Having my work deleted in front of colleagues and publicly humiliated meets both conditions. David Reynolds, who had been silently watching from the back of the room, stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before you make a rash decision, Emily." But I was done with private discussions with appeasement to cover up injustice. Karen had chosen to humiliate me publicly, and now she would face the consequences publicly. "There is nothing to discuss," I said, gathering my personal items from the conference table. "My decision is final. I will submit my formal resignation paperwork within the hour." As I walked out of the meeting room, I felt the eyes of 23 colleagues following me. Some stunned, some showing a glimmer of admiration, and a few seemingly rethinking their own career paths. Karen called after me, her voice unusually shrill. "You are making a huge mistake, Emily. Horizon Consulting is just a startup with no track record. You are throwing away job security for a delusion that building relationships matters more than professional standards." I paused at the door, turning to look her in the eye. "We will see which approach proves more valuable." My words were not a threat. They were a promise. A declaration that I would prove my philosophy not through retaliation, but by letting the truth shine. Within 24 hours, I had cleared my desk, completed exit interviews, and started my new role at Horizon Consulting. Their office was smaller than Apex, but it buzzed with the energy of people who believed in building something new, where people were valued over profits. For the first time, I felt liberated, working with people who understood that business is not just numbers, it is about trust, connection, and the American spirit of standing up to those who dismiss your worth. But I did not expect that just days later, the invisible threads I had woven would start pulling Apex's biggest clients to me, putting Karen at the center of the storm she had created. I stepped into Horizon Consulting's new office, a small but vibrant space where Chicago's sunlight sparkled through windows unclouded by arrogance or soulless spreadsheets. My resignation announcement in front of Karen Mitchell and 23 colleagues at Apex Analytics still echoed in my mind like an anthem of liberation. I did not leave to seek revenge, I left to prove a truth Karen never understood, that human trust, not data or protocols, is the foundation of success. But as Apex's biggest clients started calling, not because I solicited them, but because they chose me, the person who remembered their dogs, their dreams, I realized Karen had not just erased my work. She had dismantled her own empire, and I only needed to stand back and watch the natural consequences sweep her away. Just 3 days after starting at Horizon, my phone buzzed with a familiar number. Michael Thompson, the manufacturing company owner with the golden retriever I had asked about, called my new office line directly. "Emily," he said, his voice full of the sincerity I had come to know, "I heard you moved to Horizon Consulting. Congratulations. I would like to learn about your new company's capabilities." Over the next hour, we talked not just about his business needs or expansion plans, but about his dog now walking better thanks to a specialist vet. By the end of the call, Michael booked a consultation to discuss moving his account to Horizon. I did not have to persuade him. He chose me, not for the numbers, but because I made him feel heard. That afternoon, Sarah Bennett called. Sarah, who had shared her joy over her textile company's 15th anniversary, told me she had worked with consultants for 12 years. But I was the first to make her feel her business was more than an invoice. "If you are bringing that same care to Horizon," she said, "I want to move to you." A week later, 6 more of Apex's major clients reached out, not because I contacted them, but because they had heard through professional networks that I had left. James Carter, the mystery novel enthusiast, wanted to talk about new projects. Olivia Green, with her catering company, asked if Horizon could handle her expansion needs. They were not looking for better services. They were looking for me, the person who remembered small details about their lives, from farmers markets to their grandmother's recipes. Meanwhile, at Apex, Karen began to feel the storm she had created. Through industry contacts, I heard she was panicking. She called major clients for routine check-ins, only to find they no longer wanted to renew contracts. When she reached out to Michael Thompson to schedule a quarterly review, he politely informed her he was exploring other consulting options. Sarah Bennett, when asked about upcoming project needs, said she had found a partner who understood her business's value. Another client, James Carter, outright refused Karen's calls simply because he did not want to deal with someone who saw him as a number rather than a person. I did not do anything to poach them. I simply updated my professional profile, let the world know where I was, and continued being myself, the listener, the rememberer, the one who cared. But each call from a former Apex client was a dagger in Karen's philosophy, a reminder that she had been wrong to delete my work. She thought client loyalty lay in Apex brand, in service quality, or reputation. But she did not understand that loyalty lay in the small moments, a question about a dog's health, a congratulatory note on an anniversary, things she called idle chatter. Within a month, 14 clients accounting for over 60% of Apex annual revenue had either moved to Horizon or started discussions to do so. Apex was facing the worst client retention crisis in its history, and Karen, once smug with her delete button, was now scrambling to save what she had destroyed. Then one day, David Reynolds, Apex CEO, called me. His voice was heavy, no longer carrying the confidence of a major company's leader. "Emily," he said, "we would like to discuss a partnership opportunity. Would Horizon be interested in acquiring Apex remaining client accounts? Perhaps even hiring some staff during our strategic restructuring?" I nearly laughed at the irony. The company that had called my work garbage was now begging me to save them from the ruins they had created. David continued, his voice growing urgent. "I have to ask, what would it take to bring you back to Apex as Director of Client Relations? We are prepared to offer a significant raise and full control over relationship strategies." I paused, letting the offer hang in the air. Part of me wanted to laugh in his face, but I just smiled through the phone. "Thank you for the offer, David." I said, my voice calm but firm, "but I am very happy at Horizon." They understood the value of client relationships from day one instead of needing a crisis to see it. I hung up, feeling a wave of pride wash over me. This was not revenge through destruction, it was victory through building, through proving that my philosophy, the one Karen mocked, was the right path. And as I looked out Horizon's office window, Chicago's sunlight gleaming, I knew the storm at Apex was just beginning, and Karen would soon face the ultimate price for her arrogance. I hung up the phone after the call with David Reynolds, my heart still pounding, but not from anger or fear. It was the pulse of validation of pride in knowing I had been right that human relationships, the small details like Michael Thompson's dog or Sarah Bennett's company milestone, were the foundation of success, not the soulless spreadsheets Karen Mitchell worshipped. As Chicago's sunlight streamed through Horizon Consulting's office window, I felt the world was on my side not because I had fought for revenge, but because I had let the truth shine. In the months that followed, Apex Analytics crumbled under the weight of Karen's mistakes, while I built a new legacy at Horizon, proving that human trust and connection are an unbreakable force. And as Karen faced the ultimate price for her arrogance, I realized the most perfect revenge was not destroying an enemy, it was letting them destroy themselves. 6 months after leaving Apex, I was promoted to senior partner at Horizon Consulting. Our small office, once just a startup buzzing with passion, had become a hub of innovation in the consulting industry. The clients who followed me from Apex, Michael, Sarah, James, Olivia, and dozens more, became the foundation for the most successful year in the company's history. We did not just grow revenue, we built a culture where people were valued, where conversations about dreams and lives were seen as the most precious assets. Every day I walked into the office with pride, knowing I was living my philosophy that business is not just about profits, but about making a difference in people's lives. Meanwhile, at Apex Analytics, the storm Karen had caused became an irreparable disaster. Through industry contacts, I heard the company had laid off 30% of its staff, sold its largest downtown Chicago office, and ultimately merged with a larger competitor, a company as obsessed with efficiency as Karen had been. But what truly gave me pause was the news about Karen. She was not retained after the merger. According to those who worked with her, Karen spent her final months at Apex trying to rebuild client relationships using the cold transactional approach she had always believed in. She called clients, sent stiffly worded emails, tried to convince them Apex services were still worthwhile. But no one wanted to work with someone who saw them as a number. She had lost everything not because of me, but because of her own flawed philosophy. I heard Karen struggle to find a comparable role after leaving Apex. Recruiters hearing about her role in the client retention crisis hesitated to place her in client-facing positions. An industry acquaintance said she tried to justify herself blaming me for poaching clients, but the truth was too clear. Clients did not leave because I lured them. They left because they wanted to work with someone who genuinely cared, who remembered their birthdays, their business challenges, their personal stories. Karen never learned that lesson, even as the professional world shifted toward the approach I had pioneered. Consulting firms began investing in personalized client relationship strategies. Professional development programs emphasized treating clients as people, not transaction sources. My philosophy, the one Karen called garbage, was now the industry's gold standard. 3 months after I declined David's offer, he called again, his voice now weary. Apex had officially merged, and he wanted to know if Horizon was interested in acquiring what was left of the company. He even offered me a leadership role with a higher salary and full autonomy. But I just smiled through the phone. "I am very happy at Horizon, David," I said. They believed in the value of client relationships from the start without needing a crisis to see it. As I hung up, I felt a wave of satisfaction, not because I had defeated Karen, but because I had built something better, a legacy based on trust, connection, and the American spirit of standing up to those who dismiss your worth. I did not rejoice in Karen's failure. My satisfaction came from knowing she had created her own fate. She could have embraced my approach, learned from the soaring retention rates, recognized that personal care drove real business results. But she chose to humiliate me, delete my work, and bet on her cold transactional philosophy. And now, as she stood in the ruins of her career, I moved forward leading a team at Horizon where we celebrated clients' birthdays, shared stories about their families, and built relationships that did not just generate profits, but created meaning. This story is a testament to a truth: when power is abused to crush human value, a single act of standing up can rewrite the rules. Karen Mitchell thought she could erase my work, but she did not realize she was erasing the very foundation holding Apex together. My revenge was not in destroying her, it was in letting her destroy herself while I built a better future. The lesson here is this: never let anyone dim your worth. Stand up, believe in your path, and let the truth prevail. That is the American spirit, the way we turn injustice into triumph, one step at a time.